coming up on Lawmakers. The memory of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is honored at the Capitol. Governor Sonny Perdue opens a new driver service office in Atlanta. And Georgia is commended for preparedness in the face of a possible pandemic. Those stories and more are coming up next. This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David Zelski, filling in for Gerald Bryant. Also on Lawmakers, the House passes a measure that sets a standard for Capitol art.
And a look back at the first week of the 2006 legislature. But our lead story tonight, the annual tribute to Dr. King at the Capitol. Today marked the 21st Capitol celebration of the birthday of civil rights icon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The event featured music by the Spelman College Glee Club and presentations by former Oklahoma Congressman J.C. Watts. Dr. King's longtime aides are known at Clayton and members of the King family. But the morning began with a critique by Democratic lawmakers of the voter ID bill adopted by the House of Representatives yesterday.
You know, Dr. King fought against poll taxes, literacy tests for the citizens of Georgia and these United States. He fought for a Voting Rights Act. And I think that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was probably his greatest legacy to America. We should continue to work for his legacy. You know, this program is good. Face value is very good to honor the legacy of Dr. King. But we really want to take the time to honor the legacy of Dr. King. We should work as a party, work as a people, work as a nation to really protect the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
These are difficult times in Georgia politics. Yesterday was a difficult time in the state Senate. Yesterday was a difficult time in the Georgia House of Representatives. And sometimes as you start a day like today, you need some inspiration.
Republican legislators also shared their reflections of the legacy of Dr. King, telling the gathering that the civil rights leader improved life for all Georgians.
If there's anything that Dr. King stood for, it was peace. In the face of all adversity, tranquility, and even under attack, he stood for peace. He effected change through peace. And I would hope on this day and throughout this session that regardless of who we are and what we believe, what position we take, even when we disagree, we would do it with that same reverence and with peace.
We're here to honor a national hero, a man that changed not just Georgia and America, the world through America, through his actions. His life was taken early, but his legacy and his principles echo through history. God places men and women on earth for a purpose. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. aligned himself with God's will and therefore changed America.
We will bring you extended coverage of the King birthday commemoration later in the show.
Today, Governor Sonny Perdue officially opened the state's newest Department of Driver Services office. The office will be the only DDS center in downtown Atlanta. It is located at 445 Capitol Avenue near Turner Field. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman attended the opening and picked up a very important souvenir.
Less than a mile from the state capitol, a new DDS office is up and running. It's been operating since December, but it formally opened today.
This has been open just a few weeks, and we expect the traffic to grow, but we're committed to driver's license services in downtown.
Governor Perdue did the ceremonies just days after he pledged to keep improving DDS.
We still got work to do, but I'm proud of the results so far.
Commissioner Greg Dozier is charged with that goal.
We want to make sure that we ensure that we improve the integrity as well as the customer service of our operations.
Dozier says he wants license renewals to take place in under a half hour, so we put him to the test.
I'm going to try to get my license renewed, and the pledge is that it's going to take less than 30 minutes. It doesn't seem too busy here, and it's exactly high noon right now, so we're going to see if I can indeed get my license renewed within 30 minutes. Hello.
Well, good afternoon. How may I help you?
I'm here to get my license renewed.
Your number is 8032. Just go right over and have a seat, and they'll call you in a moment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
5 years of tenure.
After I was given a number, I waited a few moments, and then I was registered. I waited a few more minutes, and I paid less than $20 for my license.
On average,
Next, it was a pose for one of those dreaded pictures.
All right.
A short wait, and I had my new license. The Capitol Avenue DDS has been open for a little under a month now, and traffic is not quite as heavy as it is at some other locations. I got my driver's license renewed in a little under 10 minutes. That's well within the goal of the Commissioner. This new facility hasn't been as busy as most yet, but the Commissioner hopes the Governor's announcement will change that.
We continue to have problems with the time of wait in the metro area compared to the demand in the rural areas, as you mentioned. And we think as we continue here, as well as in other areas, that we'll meet that demand.
Atlantans should be advised of the new service in their backyard. In Atlanta, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Well, Governor Sonny Perdue also joined U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Mike Leavitt, and the Chief of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention at a summit to plan for a potential pandemic, as might be caused by an outbreak of bird flu. Leavitt commended Georgia for being one of the best prepared states in the nation to deal with such a disaster. He joined Julie Gerbiting of the CDC in urging businesses, schools, faith communities, and individuals to join the preparedness efforts.
We hope this doesn't happen, but we do need to prepare because pandemics occur, and when they do occur, they cause so much harm. What we can look forward to in the context of all this preparedness, that whether we have this pandemic or some future emerging infectious disease threat, our local and state public health systems will be prepared, our schools will be in shape to accommodate absenteeism, our businesses will know how to stay afloat and keep their workers working, and our communities will be able to, they'll be affected, but they'll be able to get through the problem with a minimum of loss of lives and disruption.
Good news is we have a vaccine that can produce an immune response sufficient to protect people. The dilemma and the bad news is that we don't have the capacity to manufacture the 300 million courses that would be needed to protect everyone. We can't do it fast enough to make the difference we aspire to. For that reason, the President has embarked on a crusade to change it. And within 3 to 5 years, the technologies will exist and the manufacturing capacity will exist to be able to alter that problem.
Law enforcement and security people, you saw them upstairs, will be involved in the planning process, and again the centralized communication planning that will need to be disseminate information. As we could see during the hurricane, once again a lack of a centralized information source from a factual perspective is very disarming, creates a lot of anxiety among citizens. And if there is a central area of dissemination from a medical perspective, from a security perspective, from an economic perspective, this is how we will use the planning money to design those systems and plan and train our local governments as well as responders.
Secretary Leavitt also announced that Georgia will receive $2.6 million in pandemic relief funds.
Today, the House approved a bill that would set up a study committee to decide what new works of art would hang in the Capitol. According to the bill's sponsor, there is no current system in place to make those decisions, and that is costing the state money. House Bill 978 is sponsored by Representatives Calvin Smyre and Calvin Hill.
The bill simply creates a commission comprised of House and Senate members, along with experts from the art community, the historical community, and the educational community. They will have the authority to review and request and properly evaluate all requests for artwork and make the recommendations back to the legislature. That's it. No longer will the person or party in power at the moment have the ability to commit the state to accepting and maintaining their personal desires in art selections, be it Republican and Democrat, House or Senate, legislator or bureaucrat, art professional and historians. We all have come to an agreement that this is a proper commission in a proper way to select the artwork to be displayed in this Capitol and make sure that it has proper historical significance.
An amendment that was successfully added to the bill changed the number of committee members appointed by each legislative chamber from 1 to 3. Other members will be appointed by the governor and the arts community, including the Georgia Council for the Arts and the Georgia Historical Society.
In addition to being the official federal holiday honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Monday, January 16th is also Religious Freedom Day in Georgia. Senator Judson Hill took the well today to explain why he believes this day is so important.
In recognition of President George W. Bush's proclamation of Religious Freedom Day, which was first drafted in 1993 and proclaimed by his father, the first George Bush, and in recognition of the United States Department of Education's 2003 guidelines issued explaining teacher and students' religious liberties, it's important that educators, students, teachers, parents, all Georgians know what our President, our Department of Education allows, in fact, encourages. It's set forth there on your desk, but I'd like to mention several things that the Department of Education guidelines encourage. First, students can pray, read their Bibles, and talk about their faith at school during school hours. Second, students can organize prayer groups, Bible studies, and announce their meetings. Third, students can express their faith in their classwork and homework. Fourth, teachers can organize prayer groups and Bible studies with their colleagues. Fifth, students may be able to go off campus to have Bible study during school hours. Sixth, the Department of Education guidelines say that students can express their faith at a school event. And seventh, students can express their faith at a graduation ceremony. I ask that we encourage all Georgians to commemorate, celebrate Religious Freedom Day on January 16th, which is Monday.
From a new voter ID bill passing the House to Governor Perdue's State of the State address, week one of the 2006 session was quite eventful. Here's a summary of what happened this week in the Georgia General Assembly.
On Monday, the House got off to a quick start. Two committees met to handle issues dealing with eminent domain and a new version of a voter ID bill.
I believe that if Republicans are so interested in morals and values and being people of faith, then they ought to talk about the issues. And those ought to be the things that bring people to the polls, not locking people out from the political process.
A judge ruled last year's version, House Bill 244, unconstitutional, but supporters of the bill believe Senate Bill 84 is the answer.
All this bill really ultimately says is that when you come to vote, be prepared to show us that you are who you say you are, just like you have to do to get a medical procedure, to rent a video at Blockbuster, or to walk into a Sam's Club. Show us you are who you say you are, and bring a photo ID.
On Tuesday, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce held their annual Eggs and Issues breakfast, where Governor Perdue and other Georgia leaders laid out their goals for the session.
This year, we're going to have a truth and class size bill. In kindergarten, the absolute maximum class size goes from 20 to 18, and 1 through 3 from 23 to 21, and reduces 4 in the 4th and 5th, and in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. A 4% pay raise at a minimum for all teachers. You can see an investment of $217 million. Our classroom construction, folks, and buses, bonds for buses. Look at that number, $447 million. If we're going to have lower class sizes, we're going to have more classrooms.
I support Governor Sonny Perdue and his agenda, and I'll do everything in my power to support him in trying to lead this state as the CEO of this state. And you tell me the last time a Speaker of the House stood before you and told you that he was publicly going to support the governor of this state, and we're going to move forward and lead this state in the fashion that's been led the last 4 years.
The Senate will support the governor's call for more than $1 billion in new spending on education. Unfortunately, for the last 3 years, we've faced a recession and declining revenues, and we've had to ask teachers and state employees to help us get through that with little or no pay raises and with increased health insurance benefits. This year, we hope to invest that money back into education and give them our deepest gratitude.
Today, students and families are reaching into their pockets to buy things that hope used to pay for. The greatest college scholarship program in the nation deserves better than that.
On Wednesday afternoon, Governor Perdue gave his State of the State address, where once again education was the key.
My agenda for Georgia is based on what Georgians themselves have told me that are their priorities: education, children, jobs, and safe communities.
Now that the revenue's there, I think he showed his commitment to education.
The governor has, I think, made a bold move in funding education.
I think we really need to work in Georgia for open government and a transparent process.
The peach care issue and these things that relates directly to our children, to that segment of our community, we felt those were not covered adequately.
Also on Wednesday, the House voted to lower the tax on propane and natural gas from 4% to 2%, one of Governor Perdue's initiatives.
We're not going to profit on the backs of our taxpayers with a windfall And that's what we're doing. We're giving back this windfall to the people of the state of Georgia.
And on Thursday, the House voted to pass Senate Bill 84, the voter ID bill, but not before over 5 hours of debate.
We've had an example of how this already works well, and this bill makes it even easier to go through the process.
The one that will be most affected by this than any others are our elderly. Those who have voted forever, because those are the ones who had the most problem this past time in this implementation.
And that's a look back at what happened this week in the Georgia General Assembly.
The Senate is expected to debate the voter ID bill when they convene again next Monday.
Well, elected officials joined activists and members of the family of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to celebrate the 77th birthday of the man who jump-started the civil rights movement. The event began with the vocal talents of the Spelman College Glee Club.
People didn't know that Dr. King was humorous. They always saw him on television in serious settings. But he was really very, very funny. Now, let me tell you this story. I had a woman to call me one night and said, "Zernona, I know you think that everybody likes you, but everybody doesn't." Said, "There's a woman who called me today, and she said some pretty ugly things about you." And I said, "Oh, okay, so what?" I didn't know that she had put me on a three-way phone. This was years ago, as you can imagine. But she plugged in the woman, and the woman said, "What did you say about Zernona today?" She said, "I'm so sick and tired of that old-fashioned hairstyle." Said she wears her hair piled on top of her head. She looks old. It's not fashionable. And as a matter of fact, when I looked at that hairstyle, it to me reminds me of an onion. Said she looks like she's got an onion on top of her head. Well, we hung up, and I finally said, "Oh, well, so what?" Because, you know, you're taught to not worry about what people say. Well, I was kind of sinking and emotionally feeling very down. Dr. King called. He had been on a trip, and a lot of times he would call and invite me over to the house with him, Mrs. King, to have tea. And he called and said, "Listen, I just got back. Why don't you come over and have tea with me and Coretta?" And I said, "No, I'm not in the best mood. I'm feeling kind of down." He said, "Why?" I said, "Oh, somebody's been talking about me." He said, "Oh, you've got to come now, because as your pastor, I've got to counsel with you." So he said, "If you're not here in 20 minutes, I'm coming to get you." So I finally went over, and I said, "But I'm not in a good mood." And he sat me down, and he looked at me, and he said, "You know," and he said, "Look me straight in the face." And he said, "You know, you can't worry about people. You got to be strong." And he said, "You know, it does look like an onion."
We all have a responsibility. We all have a role to play. And Dr. King's life taught us all that. And I think today, as we celebrate his legacy and celebrate his memory, I think we all have a responsibility to, from time to time, go and take a look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves honestly and nakedly, "Dear God, am I doing my part? Am I doing my part?" You know, Dr. King, the work that Dr. King started is long from being over. Yes, there are still many injustices in America, in the world. He reminded us that if there's a justice and injustice in the state of Oklahoma, that affects you in Georgia. If there is an injustice in California, that affects us in Oklahoma. If there's an injustice in Indiana, it affects those in Texas. He said an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
What a tribute and what a celebration in deference to Congressman Watts, not only a great Georgian, but a great American and a great human in the life. And we wish the King family during this time of the year, we wish Mrs. Coretta Scott King blessings during this time, and I want to thank them for being with us today as well. Zernona, thank you for personalizing the legend we call Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to talk about some of those personal things with him that helps us sense who he was as a person. J.C., thank you for giving us a picture of the walk and how we can accomplish more together, which was Dr. King's legacy. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for an inspiring tribute. We were hoping to have Congressman Lewis with us today to also acknowledge and pay tribute to the passing of Mrs. Rosa Parks, another giant in that movement, and her memory again is with us today. But as we remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a peacemaker, as a powerful leader for social change, we're glad to be here today to celebrate his life, his legacy, and yes, even his calling today on our lives to make a difference and to hold hands together. As I've said before, Dr. Martin Luther King, God gifted him with the ability to hold up our lives to the mirror of consciousness that God called us to. And he challenged us and all of us to live up to that promise of freedom that God had granted us as the founders expressed in our Constitution. So we are proud that Dr. King's legacy is part of Georgia's legacy, and he's given us a special obligation here to continue his work of building bridges, pursuing peace, and serving others. Servanthood. Whether it is feeding the sick or comforting the lonely, caring for the needs of children, foster children, those children needing adoption, we can all find a way to serve others. So as we commemorate King Day in Georgia, once again I want to call upon every Georgian to live it. What better tribute than we have to honor this legend than to live out his dream. So it's now my pleasure to call up Mr. Isaac Newton Ferris Jr. and Ms. Christine King Ferris to receive, as I present them, the proclamation this year of proclaiming once again King Day in Georgia.
On behalf of the King Center, I thank you for issuing this historic proclamation marking the Georgia tribute to Martin Luther King Jr. I want to express my warmest greetings and heartfelt appreciation to everyone who has come here today to participate in the state of Georgia's tribute as we mark the 20th anniversary of the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. In keeping with the spirit of the national theme for the King holiday, Unity, Service, Remember, Celebrate, Act, I would like to take this opportunity to urge all Georgians to make the King holiday an occasion for getting involved in community service, as well as a day of remembrance, education, and celebration. Let us strive to make the King holiday a day of greater interracial understanding, cooperation, and goodwill. As Georgians, we are all heirs of a precious legacy of hope, healing that transcends racial divisions, and we're challenged more than any citizens of any other state to show the nation how to fulfill my uncle's dream for America. To help meet this challenge, I would like to take this opportunity to call for the establishment of a permanent statuary Martin Luther King Jr. State Holiday Commission funded by the state of Georgia. Previous King holiday commissions have been established by executive order and then expired. But Martin Luther King Jr.'s home state ought to have a permanent commission, as does Arkansas, Tennessee, and other states. And ours ought to be the flagship that leads the nation. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to
we know that you really don't need much, but we thought there's some things you ought to have. So we searched around, and knowing what's coming up for you, we thought you'd be strung out on a shoestring, so when you go to jail, here's some shoestring potatoes. Then, we know how fond you are of our president, Lyndon Johnson. And we know how you're supporting everything. I've got this little cup for you, and I want this back because it's mine. And it says, let me read. It says, we are cooperating with Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. Drop coins and bills in the cup. And we you get us the end of the postcard page. Now, there's a picture of Dr. King. You've seen that. He's in deep thought. You've seen that picture many times. But it takes on a new meaning here, and it says, caption, but seriously, President Johnson, if the pill won't work, then we're going to need Dr. Spock. And you get a free gift certificate to the Atlanta Voice, okay?
All right.
And this is a special gift for me, a real one. And I want to clear up one thing. When I go to schools and they ask children, who was Martin Luther King? And they often say, he was the one who fought and died to free black people. And that's not true. Dr. King did not do that. He fought and died to free all people. All people.
Coming up Tuesday on Lawmakers, we'll have the highlights of the first day of budget briefings. Governor Perdue, State School Superintendent Kathy Cox, and the state's economist are scheduled to deliver remarks to the Joint Appropriations Committee regarding the 2006-2007 budget. Coming up Monday on Georgia Public Broadcasting, don't miss extended coverage of the Capitol tribute to Dr. King. That special presentation, Martin Luther King Jr., A Capitol Remembrance, will be broadcast Monday, January 16th at 7 p.m. If you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in Monday at 5:30 a.m. when it repeats. Now stay tuned for Rick Steve's Europe Classics. That's coming up next here on GPB.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 5th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Lawmakers returns Tuesday at 7. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.